I
Go
know.
back to this one. Yeah, right there. I just want you to be on camera as we're testing.
That's a Asian corner in the back over there, which is fun. Oh, test. It's working.
Hi guys, we are going to go ahead and get started since it is right on 7 o'clock. So my name is Ella Burrows and I'm the Legislative Affairs Director for Student Government here at Fort Hays. So thank you all for coming out to our open forum. We're so glad you guys could all be here. So today we have 4 university leaders here with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves here in a second. But the purpose of tonight is for you to ask any questions you have about Fort Hays. So there are sample questions on your tables if you need some inspiration, but please feel free to ask them anything you want. The format of this is pretty casual, so just raise your hand or stand up and they'll recognize you, and then whoever's best suited to answer the question will answer it. And we do have brownies, cookies, and Rice Krispie treats in the back, so please feel free to have some of those. And if you have any questions throughout the night, come find me. And I hope all of you guys have a great time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Stanley. I am Student Government and Student Body President.
Thank you for being here tonight. I am Tisa Mason, President.
Good evening. My name is Jill Arnsdorf, and I currently serve as the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Fort Hays State University. Do you want to borrow my mic? Some feedback?
Sorry, yeah. My name is Rob Byer. I teach in the philosophy department. I'm the president of Faculty Senate for this year. Sure.
Who's first?
No feedback.
Sorry.
We'll just share. Share mine.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, what is the administration's #1 priority for this year and next year in terms of enrollment, or do we have any new programs, new buildings in the works, that sort of thing?
I'll start and then I'll let Jill finish in. So buildings, of course, we are working on the library renovation. That will take several years, but the planning is in process. But we were able to get $17 million from the federal government to renovate the library. It's going to be big. It's going to be awesome. We also got $5 million from the state legislature to put air conditioning and Gross Memorial Coliseum. So that will be exciting, especially if you're a May graduate. That'll also take a couple of years. In terms of enrollment, we've got lots of strategies that we're working on. We started last year with our regional enrollment rate. Anybody from the 13 states know what I'm talking about? So we have 13 states surrounding Kansas where we offer now a regional rate that is equal to in-state rate. We said it would take 2 years for that to pay for itself. This is year 1, and we had an undergraduate enrollment. We had a 49% increase of students from those states. And for the students that were already here and continuing, they also got the discounted tuition. And so that was really a great gift for the students from those 13 states. We've got some other strategies going on through our strategic enrollment plan. And I'll let you talk about programs.
Sure. Thanks for the question. In terms of #1 priority, it's enrollment. And what that means for me is, in my role as provost, first of all, do you have any idea what a provost is? It's kind of an odd word. Okay, so let me quickly explain that. If you look it up in the dictionary, it talks about kind of is the keeper of the academics. So I oversee all of the academic affairs at the university. So that means all of the departments, the programs that you're part of, all of those report up to me in some way, shape, or form. And so I oversee that work. Work a lot with faculty and staff and students as well to oversee academic programs. So that's what a provost is. #1 priority is enrollment. That means not only recruiting new students to the university, but keeping you here once you get here, figuring out ways to keep you here, retain you so that you can graduate on time and with the credentials that you need to hopefully get a good job, but also be successful in your communities, wherever that might be. My work is primarily with the deans and some of my other direct reports to continually be thinking about and working on what programs do we need to offer here at Fort Hays State University so that we are meeting the needs of our employers, but also meeting the demands that are coming in from students. So we're constantly looking at what those new programs might be. I had a proposal come on my desk literally yesterday for a Bachelor of Applied Science. That's not a degree that we currently have at Fort Hays, but it's a degree we're looking at to have more of an applied science degree option for students when they come to the university. So that's an example of one program that will have to go through multiple levels of approval before we can offer it, but we're constantly working on those kinds of things. I was visiting with Dr. Beyer before we got started. Today I just received from actually his recommendation. He had found that the Chronicle of Higher Education had put together Building Tomorrow's Workforce, what employers want you to know. And so this is a hot off the press piece of research that I will be perusing over the next few weeks to think about perhaps some things that I can glean from this that we need to permeate into our academic programs. The on-campus presence is critical, but keep in mind that we're also trying to grow our online presence and programs for our online students as well as our international partnerships, which mostly include our students in China. I don't know if Ryan or Dr. Beyer, okay.
Go ahead, David.
We have a question from the chat, from online. Does the university plan to move most courses towards Z courses? If so, will this be for both undergraduate and graduate programs?
Did you say Z courses? Yes. Okay, so should I perhaps describe quickly what a Z course is? Are all of you in the room familiar with a Z course? Okay, so it's a course where you learn how to write the letter Z. Okay, that fell completely. Good try. Comedy has never been my thing. I don't know why I keep trying. Thank you. Okay, so a Z course is essentially a course that has a tag on it. It's what we call in Workday a tag that is an OER course, so an open educational resource course. We're very mindful of the expenses that you incur as a student, both in tuition fees, but also the supplies that you have in your classes. And so our hope is to get as many courses approved as Z courses, but I don't know that we'll ever get to 100%. I don't know that that's realistic in every subject area and every discipline area, but our goal is to get as many as possible. I have a feeling, we don't really have a goal for that in our strategic plan, not that we're working toward as many as possible. We don't have a stated goal. I have a feeling that eventually we may receive a goal from our Kansas Board of Regents on that. They're very involved in statewide OER work, and I believe at Fort Hays we're ahead of the system in our acceptance of OER, or Open Educational Resource, or what we call Z courses here at Fort Hays. You want to say something?
Yeah.
You bet.
So I was actually on the committee several years ago that started to focus on, at the time they weren't thinking about it as a Z course. That's like a relatively, it's a couple years old designation. But I was on a committee that the focus was really thinking about OERs. What courses can we make OERs for? Again, that's open educational resources. So those are things that are still, high quality and peer reviewed and created by experts in the discipline, but they don't come with all of the kind of baggage that comes with like traditional books. So I'm sure all of you have bought a book from a publisher for a class, and then you have to get an updated version next time, and there's like 3 changes, and it costs $180 or whatever, right? That's exactly the kind of thing that like OERs are meant to defray, right? So the idea is a high quality resource that is pedagogically sound, that is up to date, that experts have reviewed and created, but that also doesn't cost a lot, and because it's intended to be open in terms of its like Creative Commons licenses and copyright licenses. Then it can be edited and modified kind of on the fly by experts. So I was on a committee that was working on that since I want to say like maybe 2016 or something. It's several years old, right? And I have seen and been part of the development of several of those. So there's currently a program that incentivizes that. So, if there's a thing that departments can do to list their courses as Z courses if there are zero material cost for the materials in that course, and that like is specified in the course catalog. It's also something that like departments, there's a kind of incentive to do it. So there's movement on that, and people are very interested in doing it. Lots of departments and faculty across the university are engaged in doing it, and it is incentivized. We have a committee that works on it. In fact, I think the librarian that we have, Claire Nickerson, who does that kind of work, is incredibly good, and I think she's actually been really actively involved in the Kansas committee, the statewide committee, to develop OERs. So that is a priority. We are working on it. I don't know, as Provost Arnsdorf said, there isn't like a specific goal, but it is important and a priority, and we take it seriously and are working on it.
What is being done to better accommodate the LGBTQ community on campus and help combat the transphobia that happens?
I can start with that. So, so the question was, what is being done to help accommodate and support the LGBTQ community on campus? And what was the last part? Help combat the transphobia that is happening. So I think that's a big role of the Student Government Association. When student organizations or students individually have those concerns, definitely bring them to us. We take those very seriously. And of course bring them up the ladder as we can. We have advisors that are for the purpose of helping us with those situations. Recently one of our advisors was Dr. Teresa Lynn Clounch, and she was very helpful in definitely advising us in that way. So please bring those concerns to us. And I would say also that student engagement does a good job of supporting those students, providing events for those students to feel like they belong at Fort Hays State University. So,
So we have a senior diversity officer, as you're referring to, Dr. Clonch. That was part of our role. So a lot of the programming aspects will stay in student engagement. When we were building the Fishley Wills Center, there was a lot of talk about diversity and meeting students' needs where they're at and who they are, so that it was going to be a very inclusive environment. In addition, we're going to move some of that work, which has to do with Title IX and compliance issues, into the Office of General Counsel and the compliance officer, so that we can deal with federal regulations as well as other areas in a very competent way. So we're going to keep programming and engagement with student affairs, and then we're going to separate that out and have a really strong supportive environment for those who have concerns, a place for complaint, and to be proactive in policy alignment.
Do you want to hear from all of us, or? Whatever you guys feel like. Well, I don't have much to add other than this is all, it's not just the four of us up here's responsibility, it's everyone in the room and everyone at the university to just keep the conversations open and the learning occurring. I think my responsibility to this, I talked early on, I work less with students than sometimes I like, but my responsibility is working with the faculty and the staff, specifically in academic affairs, to keep the open lines of communication and keep learning about how to create engaging classrooms, safe classrooms, open conversation and dialogue in classrooms. So my work here is less directly with students, but it's with teaching and innovation, learning technologies that allow for safe space for students, both online, on campus, and in our international partnerships. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I would just say that I don't think currently there's anything in particular that Faculty Senate has done, or there's no resolution or item being considered, and part of that I would guess is because, you know, that as a particular issue hasn't been brought to any particular faculty senator. So what I would suggest, you know, is we do have a committee on Faculty Senate called the Student Affairs Committee, and part of what that committee does is work pretty closely with student government or just with students in general that like have concerns. And so, you know, you could certainly express those. The current chair of that committee is Dr. Lori Kniffen in leadership. And that's something that, you know, we could try to take up as a kind of item, but of course, you know, we can give a resolution or give a proposal individually in terms of what classrooms look like. That's going to be something you would want to talk to a particular instructor about, or if there's a, you know, I don't know, like a particular practice or something, some kind of occurrence that you are concerned about or that people are concerned about, I guess I would be contacting the people that moderate that space or that guide it or something, if that's a faculty member. So.
I would just add that we talk a lot at Fort Hays State, and Jill was talking about this as well, is about having an ethic of care. We ask our faculty and our staff and our students to have an ethic of care. And an ethic of care really means accepting one another and celebrating one another. Also want to remind all students that they are empowered, they have a voice, they have opportunities, either working directly with the student government or through other avenues. If you see something that's not right, please speak up. Because we want to solve the issues and continue to develop an engaging student environment that we're really proud of.
If I may, I'd like to just share a quick example. I'm not trying to hijack the forum, but I want to share an example of that kind of work just occurring. I don't know if you've looked yet, but interim grades were entered on Monday of this week. So hopefully that major week, when you looked at your interim grades, or what we used to call midterm grades, that now is a policy for on-campus and online courses. That policy, which I approved, came from students and student government and the virtual student senate, then went to faculty senate, to one of the committees that Dr. Byer just referred to. It came out of faculty senate as a joint recommendation to myself and the academic council as policymakers for the institution around academic affairs. And now we have interim grade policy, which has absolutely nothing to do with LGBTQ+, but it's an example of a very recent occurrence in a positive way of students mobilizing with the appropriate people to make some change that's, I think, going to benefit all of our students at Fort Hays State. So check your midterm grades if you haven't already.
And we have a tutoring center if you need help to get them up.
Real quick, one word that Dr. Byer used was resolution, and that's something that the student government can do. So basically a resolution is a statement of support or disapproval of something. And this last spring, we were approached by the Gender and Sexuality Association here on campus, and they asked if we could help them in any way. So one thing that we did do is pass a resolution stating that the Student Government Association supports for all faculty or staff members at Fort Hays State University to use students' preferred pronouns, because that's a very basic way that we can support our students. So, and that's just something that we can do to let the whole university know that this is something that we're in support of, and yeah, so.
A little bit more on what has changed in terms of like interim grades versus what you said used to be midterm grades?
So the question was just explaining a little bit more between what used to be interim and midterm. It's the same thing, it's just a different name. Is that what you're asking? Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. So the policy change was, our policy was that midterm, or now what we call interim grades, were just required for on-campus classes. So how many of you in the room also are taking an online class? Okay. So if you wouldn't have, prior to Monday of this week, end of day. You wouldn't have had an interim grade entered into what we're now using Workday for that course. I'm hoping that faculty are using Blackboard or something like that to keep up your grades, but interim grades were not required to be entered for your online courses. So that's the change. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Question?
Go ahead, David.
Could you guys briefly touch on the restructuring of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences?
Do you want me to start that one?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can you repeat the question? Did you just ask what?
Yeah, just touch on the restructuring.
Touch on. Okay. The question is to touch on the restructuring of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Science. So this work, so that I try not to go on and on about this because I could, because there's a lot of work that's been done. The restructuring in the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences is really an administrative restructure. So it's not impacting your programs, the majors that you're in, the minors that you're in, the certificates that you're in. It's not impacting any of that work at all. What it is impacting is the way that college is structured. So every unit on campus here has a structure. You've probably, each of you, you've seen an organizational chart at some point in your life. Perhaps some of you are studying things about that type of thing in your business or leadership or management classes. The organizational structure is changing. The enrollment, unfortunately, in that college has been declining for lots of years, for at least 5 years. There are external factors that the university is trying to get in front of, pertaining to low enrolled programs. There are opportunities that positioning the college in a different way, the college can take advantage of. So when you have lots of organizational units, what ends up happening are silos. Silos occur. And sometimes those silos are good and sometimes they're not so good. And so this restructure, I hope for you all, you won't be negatively impacted at all by this. But I hope that you're positively impacted, because what we end up doing is creating opportunities for programs to work closer together and creating new opportunities for you as students. Dr. Beyer is currently in the Department of Philosophy, and in that college, the proposal that went to KBOR, which I will be presenting tomorrow morning to the first round of reviews at KBOR, which is the Kansas Board of Regents, the proposal is that philosophy and history would come together as one department, but that nothing would change at this point in a negative way in the philosophy or history programs. I hope that those programs coming together under one unit might create some synergistic opportunities for a new major, a new minor, perhaps a new graduate program in some unique areas. So that's a bit about the college restructure. I'll just share quickly that, and I'll reiterate again, this will not negatively impact students. It won't. What might negatively impact students is if a program has to be shut down, and we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to avoid that by getting in front of some of the external forces that are at play that we have absolutely no control of. We're trying to control what we do have control of at Fort Hays State. In terms of the process going forward, so last spring, this work began. And continued through the summer, and then over the last few months, we've come to recognition of this needing to happen, and perhaps kind of an acceptance that this needs to happen. And so the college itself has been involved in lots of feedback opportunities. I know Ryan was in attendance at many of those opportunities, probably on behalf of students. Thank you, Ryan. And Faculty Senate, Dr. Beyer has been very involved, both last spring and then this fall. We now are submitting to Kansas Board of Regents. So the Kansas Board of Regents has 3 levels of approval that have to occur before this actually comes to fruition. So it's not finished. It will be likely January before anything, or excuse me, December before anything is approved by the board. And then we'll work to make changes probably for the next academic year, which you as students won't feel in a negative way at all. It may eventually cause some leadership changes in those units. It might have administrative assistants moving around a little bit. Eventually there may be some people that move offices to create more synergy with new units, but you may have to go to a different office for something, but this is not a way to cut programs or cut people. And I think that's an important message. Do you want to say anything, Dr. Beyer, about?
Sure, yeah. So I think that if you've been paying attention and following this, that like this is something where our conversations and discussions have gotten, you might say, better over time, because I think that there was quite a lot of like dismay and anger and sadness and surprise and upset when this was sort of initially discussed last spring. And I think, and I'm partial as a faculty member, I think at least sort of for good reason, but also I think that what Provost Arnsdorf said, I think is basically right, which is, I think that this is, ideally, I think departments would like to do what they have done. And I think that ideally that would be the case, but we aren't in ideal conditions. And I think that the way the process has developed has given a lot of opportunity for faculty feedback and for students through faculty to give feedback. I think that the provost and administration have been very open to receive a lot of that feedback from faculty members and from departments and chairs. So I think that it is true, as it always is, anytime you have a big decision like this, that it's unlikely every single person involved is going to be super happy about it. But I think that it is the kind of thing that we're doing to, in a certain way, avoid a worse thing. So I don't know if you guys are familiar, there's like this kind of famous quote from Winston Churchill, that democracy is like the worst system of government except for all the other systems of government, right? And so I don't feel that way about this reorganization stuff, and I don't think all faculty do, but I do think a lot of faculty think this isn't really ideal, but it might be much better than what might happen if we didn't do something like this, which is some kind of external body or external threat making that decision for us, and maybe making a much more severe decision like just getting rid of entire programs, departments, and faculty lines. So I think that's all I would have to say about it.
Even without the external threat, thinking innovatively and creatively is really about what this is about. We've talked a lot about the external threat, but the thing that I think to focus is on the positive aspects, the new energies and the collaborations that may help you have new opportunities as students. So sometimes I think we need to focus more on the positive.
So I would just say also, and this actually is just about a word that the provost used, silos. Do you guys understand the context of that term? So what she was saying is basically like a silo would be something that kind of gets like enclosed and they're just like isolated from other groups, right? So when people talk about siloing, it's like this area is now just talking to each other and they're enclosed. There's no input from any outside. There's no reaching out to like generate maybe some new innovative creative programs. It's just like it just gets sort of like closed in on itself. And so part of the idea of the reorganization that is, this more positive thing that President Mason is talking about is maybe the possibility of breaking down some of those things and doing some collaborative or interdisciplinary work that wasn't being done previously.
So in more depth, how has or how will administration take steps towards sponsoring advertisements or college recruiters to help the enrollment?
So last year when we started the 13 state regional tuition initiative, we hired 3 additional admissions counselors. We actually had a 4th one. We spent $750,000 in marketing, especially for digital marketing. We have, during this year, split out what was used to be called URM into the University of Communication and the University of Marketing. The reason for that is that marketing has one sole focus. Everyone in that office knows that their job is to market for the purpose of recruitment. The Office of Communication now focuses on reputation and revenue. So reputation would involve highlighting the excellent work of our faculty who are doing research or our students who are having success. And revenue comes through some of our brand management, like Fort Hays State University sportswear that sometimes we get revenue off of. So we created that focus so that there'd be more purpose and direct growth in that area. Our Office of Communication has already seen a lot of success with their digital marketing, and that's starting to grow. So we continue to look at, we also hired an external agency last year to create some advertisement for us, for our online students, as well as some on-campus materials, seeing that to explode kind of our capacity, address our capacity, and do some different things. We've got a lot of specific initiatives, including growing the admission staff for on-campus and initiatives for our online student body. And if you're ever interested in being a recruiter for Fort Hays State University, you should let us know, because we're always looking for people who love Fort Hays and would like to help us sell the university.
So I'll add just a couple things, if you don't mind, related to advertisements and recruiting. One of the things that we did a little differently this year, and I don't know that we've seen the fruits of this yet because some of the work is still being completed, but we took an allocation of that $750,000 and allocated it to each college so that each dean could determine where do we want to spend some of the marketing dollars, the recruitment dollars within the college. And so I don't believe we've done that I don't know that we've done that as strategically as we did this year. The other thing I'll add, President Mason mentioned strategic enrollment planning. And so when we have a strategic enrollment plan that perhaps is a new program or expanding a program, there are marketing dollars associated with that pour into specifically marketing for that program. So we're doing a lot more digital, less paper, but a lot more digital. So it's sometimes unnerving because we don't see it because we're not the audience that we're trying to recruit. You are, but you're here. So the people we're trying to recruit aren't sitting in this room, and so we're not necessarily going to see a lot of that, which to me sometimes is unnerving. But we have some really good data analytics that are allowing us to see the leads coming in and how those are connected to departments on campus and how those departments are interfacing with them.
Do you guys feel that the campus legislature has funded Fort Hays adequately, and that they're funding all of higher education adequately?
Fort Hays grew for 19 consecutive years, and there was not an increased allocation to Fort Hays State University specifically, because we get a block grant, and that block grant was funding us on enrollment that was very old. So from that perspective, and I know that there's a lot of people that are interested. In fact, every Tuesday afternoon I have a meeting with all the other presidents and the CEO of the board, and they were talking about, they have a commitment to starting to look at that allocation once again. But I will say this past legislative session, especially a big thank you to our legislators. I mean, we got $17 million from the federal government for our library. We got the $5,000. We got raises for our faculty and staff. There was an increase to our base funding. So even though that didn't address necessarily the long-time block grant, we did very, very well and are very appreciative for all the legislative efforts that helped us move forward.
So does that include trying to get better pay for student jobs?
So we built a budget, and let me tell you a little bit about the budget process. Each year in January, we form a budget committee, which is basically our senior leadership team, which are people who, all our academic deans and other people who lead across the university, so they have much more of a breadth of experience and responsibility. We add to that committee then 2 representatives from the student government, 2 representatives from staff senate, and 2 representatives from faculty senate, and we put together our budget. One of our priorities last year was to increase student wages. We went to the board with a slight increase to tuition proposal. that increase would still make our tuition at least $1,000, if not more, less expensive than any other of the KBOR institutions. The week we were to present, the governor told us that we couldn't increase our tuition. And because of the loss of that tuition revenue, we were unable to move forward with raising the rate for student employees. But we talk about it constantly. We want to create an opportunity to do that. Even our chief financial officer, Wesley Winch, talks very passionately about how to find a way to do that.
I feel like there's larger areas for expansion for student employment, more opportunities for students to get jobs on campus. And would that cause a decrease in pay, or are you guys comfortable with expanding opportunities and still maintaining minimum pay?
I don't know if there's a lot of expansion opportunities because people have the opportunity to create jobs within their budgets right now. And they can even, depending on the work, if the work is of a higher level skill set, they can get a higher wage for that student's, those jobs, and those do exist on campus. But don't also forget, and I know that you're talking about on-campus employment, we've got a lot of internship opportunities. We're expanding paid internship opportunities that match really well with your academic careers, and hopefully, I love on-campus employment. It's a retention issue as well because you get to work in an office and know faculty and staff, get to know them better. It works well with your grades, and we know that we have a lot of students who are working on campus. Interestingly, I think about 94% of our students are working, and trying to remember the data. We just did a survey on this, and we're going to update it every year. So I can bring that data to student government, or you can come by and pick it up if you're interested. But I was interested in the survey about how many of our students are starting to make money with online businesses and social media posts and some of the other new ways that students are making money. But we've got entrepreneurs in the audience, and we're always thrilled for that as well.
Go ahead.
Do you have initiatives, specific ones, to recruit and encourage more ethnic and racial diversity on campus?
One of the initiatives that we've done for a long time is our Hispanic College Institute. And that's, of course, for anyone who's first generation with a specific interest in helping the Hispanic student body grow. And that has been successful at Fort Hays State and continuing to grow. And if you know anything about the Hispanic College Institute, it is a phenomenal program. We bring students on campus for 3 days. We will bus them here. It's free of charge. They stay in the residence halls. They learn everything from how to do a FAFSA for what it's going to be like to be on campus. And they, I believe, all get admitted as part of the process and have the opportunity to earn scholarship dollars while they go through the program. So that's something that's very targeted, is our Hispanic College Institute.
If I could just add to that, one of the ways that I think, in terms of, and I'm thinking about our recruitment process for faculty and staff, we want to diversify our faculty body as well, because there's tons of research out there that shows when you see someone like you, you're more willing to join that effort. And so I know that there are we have concerted efforts in our strategic plan to diversify our faculty and staff, which also includes people like admissions, are they counselors now?
Counselors.
Yeah, admissions counselors. So I would encourage you to consider that type of work if you're thinking about what's next after college. Think about those kinds of opportunities as you consider what's next, because you can be the face of the university for someone else like you.
Also, don't want to forget our international students. We have a lot of strategies for our international students, and we had an increase in our international students on campus this year as well.
I would also mention that just in the context of Faculty Senate, just to echo what Provost Arnsdorf said, so last year, after a year or so of working out the specifics, the Faculty Senate passed a diversity resolution that had some very specific language about how we might improve that in the context of just sort of efforts on campus, scholarship, recruitment, a variety of things. So that's something that is on the mind of members of the faculty, primarily, I think, or at least in some context in terms of making sure that we have a suitably diverse faculty body. But as Provost Arnsdorf said, sometimes that affects recruitment and enrollment and stuff. So
I'd also like to take the opportunity to talk about your opportunity to get some experiences through study abroad, which Ryan can speak directly about in a minute. And even if not studying abroad, you can also do an exchange program in the United States. So I don't know if you know that, but say, for example, you're a biology student and you think it would be really cool to go to a university in Florida and study marine biology for a semester, because you may not be able to do that at Fort Hays. You will pay our tuition and fees in exchange when you go to another university. We've had a lot of students go to Alaska and different places or larger areas that they wanted to experience, and so it's a great opportunity. And Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about what you did?
I would love to. So this last summer, I was working on both a business degree and a Spanish degree, and I had the opportunity to finish my Spanish degree in Argentina this summer over 8 weeks, and I came back with 12 credits. It was an excellent time. There is so much value in diving into a culture that's unlike your own. So I would definitely recommend to anyone who's even slightly interested, go talk to Stacy Lang in the Study Abroad office and look at the programs. We have so many partnerships for study abroad. It was extremely difficult to choose because I had to narrow it down to like 15. So yes, I really enjoyed it, and very cliche, but it was the time of my life. So if you're thinking about it, definitely go see Stacy.
And Stacy's office is in the Memorial Union in the basement with International Student Services and the old student government offices.
I keep thinking of things as well regarding diversity at the university. I mentioned faculty and staff initiatives to boost our diversity efforts there. Here's an example of what we're doing. Every national search that occurs, so most of those are faculty. We do have some national searches for staff positions as well. They are receiving what we call a diversity boost. And so when we're posting in things like the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is where this publication came from that I referenced earlier, we're boosting that job ad. So it's going out to people that have identified some way, in some way, in a diverse population. And so that's an example of something that we've invested resources into at the university to expand our pool so that we can have more faculty and staff diversity here on campus and in our classrooms. The other thing that I'll mention is just today, a new Global Studies certificate was launched. And so that's an example of faculty gathering and talking about how do we globalize the curriculum in a way that a student maybe that can't leave Hays can experience a globalized curriculum in a way that perhaps it couldn't be, perhaps might be a way that someone's approaching or pursuing. I'm sorry, I need to go to bed. Pursuing a globalized curriculum in ways that perhaps is more affordable and accessible if you can't go to Argentina for the summer. So that's another example of something that I think as we globalize our curriculum, we're going to hopefully diversify our student body and our faculty and staff positions.
Austin?
Could you talk about a little bit about the reduction in general education requirements, kind of what that looks like, why that was implemented?
Sure. Let me get a drink first. So the question was asking about the general education program. So this fall, after many, many years of work, the new FHSU core was launched. Our general education program that many of you came under, because not all of you I know are freshmen or first-year students at Fort Hays, you came under a program that has been around since the 80s and early 90s, and it was time to revise that. So I think about 7 years ago, work started to begin to revise the general education program. About a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago now, the Kansas Board of Regents began an initiative to look at a system-wide general education program to allow for more seamless transfer for students across the Kansas institutions. And so we launched our new FHSU core this fall, and just this past June, the Kansas Board of Regents passed a system-wide general education framework and policy. So what we're working on now is taking our existing core, which some of you are on, some of you probably are still in the older general education program, and we're now moving it into what is going to be called, well, I'm not sure what it's going to be called, but it'll be our new gen ed program that fits into the system-wide framework. That system-wide framework is only 34 or 35 credit hours. The old general education program here at Fort Hays was 55 credit hours. So the program is going to be reduced drastically in number of credits. What that will allow you to do is to add a minor, add a second major, add other certificates, diversify your curriculum in a way that allows you to still finish on time and not perhaps still add the skills and the knowledge and the opportunities to your curriculum in ways that perhaps you weren't afforded before. The policy states that that has to be in place by fall of '24. However, we're working really hard to try to get that implemented for fall of 2023. And what will happen is there will be a process where current students can move into the system-wide program or stay in their existing program. We're still working through those details. We have a group of faculty right now in Faculty Senate and the General Education Committee who are working on how to take our existing core into that system-wide framework. So we really didn't have a choice to move in this direction, but we're embracing it and we're working hard to keep what we have that's great about our existing core, but still fit the parameters of the new framework. Say something?
Yeah. So I think that one thing that it's important to think about is that's a pretty big change, right? From 55 hours to 34, that's 7 classes basically that now you don't really have to take, which is a good thing, right? You have a little more flexibility, you have a little more time. One thing I would say, just in the context of thinking about general education, I know that when I was a student, I didn't always like gen ed classes that I took, because I thought, I'm going to do this particular thing. Why do I have to learn about this area that's totally separate from that, right? And I think that part of the value of that has to be in the context of thinking about what a university is and what a university education is, right? So it is common now to think about the degree that you're going to get at a university as just like a slightly fancier kind of job training, right? That you're going to get a credential and you will go out and get a job or something. And that is historically not really, at least not the main purpose of a university, right? I mean, the main purpose of a university is to serve the public good. It's to make you well-rounded people, full, multidimensional human beings, right? And the idea is that historically, that kind of thing was only available to people that were very well off, or people that had patrons, or, you know, if you're come from a wealthy family and you aren't the firstborn child, maybe they send you off to a monastery, which, right, is a kind of early form of a university. And I think one of the amazing things about higher education in the United States and in Kansas is, especially at a place like Fort Hays that is so affordable, is it allows you, regardless of your economic background, to take advantage of this thing that for so long, for so many years, was the kind of thing that only people who were already wealthy could take advantage of. Not just in the context of you getting a degree that will allow you to sort of have some economic mobility, but getting a degree that will expose you to things and affect you as a person in ways that are not quantifiable, right, and not calculable in those ways. And I mention that in part from experience. I grew up in a really poor family. The only way that I could go to college was through Pell Grants and through work study, through scholarship. And I was a first-generation college student. I think in either side of my family, I'm the only person to ever have gotten a PhD. And that is because, we have a program like we do. And a lot of people come to various kinds of majors because they took a gen ed class and they realized something was really interesting they didn't even know existed, right? I sometimes still have emails from people who graduated years ago, and they'll email me and say, I actually didn't really like the class I took of yours during when I was taking it, and now that I'm out in the world, I've realized just how significant it is for me in my development. So I think that when we think about general education, it is very common. It's not at all uncommon to be like, it's all of these extra hours. Why do I need to take it? It's not relevant to my career. But I would encourage us to think about general education as the kind of thing that is developing a kind of public good and affecting you in ways that are not just purely about economic units or something. So.
Great perspective.
I'm Alex Johnson. So we've been talking about the future a lot of the university. I'd like to take that even further. Where do you see Fort Hays being in 10, 15 years time? Or where would you like it to be?
I'll start with some of my thoughts. First of all, we'll be growing. We, like I said, had 19 consecutive years of growth. We're a very innovative and a very strong institution that has high value. And we're in a little bump now, but we'll be growing. I think that one of the things I love about Fort Hays State University is TILT, our Teaching, Innovation, and Learning Technologies. And we are constantly, through that very skilled staff, looking at what's new, cutting edge on learning technologies and how that will advance teaching and learning. I was listening to a podcast this week about, AR and ER and how all of this software is developing. We have a team that is developing a digital campus plan to talk about teaching and learning technologies across all of our different areas, online, globally, on campus, and how we invest in the infrastructure very thoughtfully and strategically and moving forward. Very excited about the monies that we received to launch our cyber security initiative and tech incubator. And so our impact on growing businesses and saving small and medium-sized business in Western Kansas, and the way that we will deploy our informatics micro internships is going to have been well established along with our Small Business Development Center. So the economic impact that we can continue to make. I've had conversations with some people in the community, even just another follow-up conversation today. How do we take some of our students who are interested in staying in Hays and work with the Small Business Development Center and people who are ready for succession planning in their small business here, and do a transition with a partnership with a bank and upskill the students who are ready to take over a new business. So I think you'll see a lot more town and gown. And it's just going to continue to bring new and more exciting opportunities for our students, our faculty, our staff, and our communities that we serve. I love all the outreach we do. I love that the speech path students go out and do hearing clinics, that students in accounting go out to communities and do taxes, and the hands-on learning that we do in meaningful ways will continue to grow. Part of our strategic plan is all about the Carnegie classification and civic engagement, and so more opportunities for you to do that, internships, and those are just a few things off the top of my head.
Okay. Alex, is that right? Nice to meet you, Alex. Thanks for the question. First and foremost, we have to still maintain true to our mission. And right now, our mission is to develop engaged global citizen leaders. I don't know that our mission will change a lot in 10 to 15 years, but that's something that we need to be mindful of and be thoughtful about. So I believe our mission will still remain relatively the same, although the words may change a little bit. So in terms of how we do that, I think that's going to look different in 10 to 15 years. I think we'll still have a very robust on-campus population of students. I hope we can continue to grow, rebound and then grow our online student body. And I hope that those two bodies can perhaps connect a bit more together, because I think there's tremendous value in a traditional age student, like many of you are in the room, connecting with one of our adult students, perhaps in coursework or innovative ways to learn from one another. I think there's tremendous value in that. So I hope we can be more thoughtful about that, and I hope it doesn't take us 10 to 15 years. I hope that we can continue to be responsive and perhaps even more responsive to workplace and community-based needs. I really appreciated Dr. Byer's comments about general education. And I hope that in 10 to 15 years, our town-gown relationships are strengthened, and that those town-gown relationships aren't just about the Hayes community, but it's global, which then increases our international partnerships. We have 2 huge partnerships in China. I hope that I want in 10 to 15 years to be talking about multiple partnerships with multiple partners across the globe, focusing still on our China partnerships, but how have we expanded those beyond that country? One other thing that I think we are already moving toward, and I mentioned the traditional experience for students on campus, but I also think we need to think about how do we credential differently. The credit hour, the 3 credit hour course that all of you are probably enrolled in, 4 or 5 of those, or perhaps more of those this semester, is really critical. But we have to meet the needs of our students as well. And sometimes that may look like more 8-week courses or different types of credentials that a student might come into the university to obtain. And we need to be more nimble with that. So I hope in 10 to 15 years that perhaps coming to campus and spending 4 years here, that's still a great option, but we have many other options for students depending on where they are in their lives and how quickly or how spread out they want to have their education to be.
So I guess I would say, I was going to try to say something silly like we'll have a chapter campus on Mars, but that doesn't seem suitable. So I think what I would say is that, I think that hopefully we'll be able to incorporate like new pedagogical methods and new technologies into existing courses in ways that are fitting both for you as students and for faculty that are deploying and designing those courses. But I'm also hopeful that, you might think that there are kinds of things that even in the future we will want to maintain and make sure that are the same. And so when I'm thinking about things like, a good judgment or integrity, those are things that are important. And those things don't go out of style. And so hopefully we can give, with the education that we provide, people a good basis for that. Many of you, maybe most of you, will probably change jobs several times. And it might be the case, especially if you have a particularly applied degree, that kind of information becomes outdated, right? You just have to go to more trainings, you got to keep up with it, right? I read an article a few years ago about a young woman who she was in Australia, and she got an engineering job. And she said that the thing that actually helped her succeed in her job the most were her backgrounds in physics, in physical sciences, and of course in philosophy, a little plug for my department there. But the point of it, of course, is that what she said is all of the sort of engineering specific stuff that she learned within a few years was no longer sort of the industry standard, and she had to basically get continued updated education. But the stuff that she had learned in some of those other classes that were more general were still applicable and were still really helpful and informative in her being really successful and being good. And so I think that insofar as what we do is at least partly to provide you with not only a set of transferable economic skills that will allow you to do a particular job or occupation really well, but also a good basis to learn how to learn and learn how to reason and think and be good, full, well-rounded people. And that's the kind of thing that, I would like to think doesn't go out of style and will still be the case in 10 to 15 years.
Okay, last call for questions. Does anyone have any final questions for the panelists? All right, well, thank you guys all so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. But if you do have any other questions, coming to Student Government Senate meetings every Thursday at 7 is a great way to get some of these questions answered. This week we are meeting in the Robbins Center at 7, and we'd love to see some of you there. So without further ado, we'll just wrap this up.
Yeah, I think that was really